So, Stephanie called me several weeks ago and asked if I would be the one to introduce Vital Signs Are Good. And though I was extremely honored and flattered that she asked me to do that, thought about it for a minute, and I said no. I said, I had too small a part to play in this game to be the one to truly introduce Vital Signs. The smallest part I had was talking Jim Glover into buying her as a 2-year-old. Pretty big purchase at the time, but as we all know, it turned into not just a purchase, but a legacy. And the next thing, the next step that Lee and I were the coach. That's all we really did. I wrote her a little bit, but our job was to put this team together. And that's where we are very proud. And so I asked Stephanie if she would call Kristen and ask her to introduce Vital Signs Are Good. And so here we are.
I probably should have gone first because it got me all choked up already. And as you guys know, this week's been a pretty emotional one for me. I felt all the emotions of every end of the spectrum this week, so bear with me to try to get through this again. But where do I even begin on describing, in my opinion, the greatest horse that ever lived? Of course, I'm biased, but to me, there'll never be anything that ever comes close to Vital Signs Are Good. Tonight, instead of talking about her accolades,
no. We need new batteries. There you go.
Try again.
Tonight, instead of talking about her accolades and accomplishments, I wanted you to hear about who she was, because she was so much more than what she did in the show pen. Most of you probably don't know this story, but Lucy was defying the odds from the very beginning of her life. Long before I owned her, she was born, and her breeder, Kristen Rinkenberger, had many babies born that same year, and they all got very sick, and she almost lost her as well as the others. The veterinarian called her after treating Lucy and said her vital signs are good. That day, her legendary name that is known worldwide was born, and so her story began. Shirley Roth, J.R. Reichert, Ken Tugwell, and Keith Whistle bought Lucy at a yearling sale and began developing her into the most illustrious Western pleasure horse the world has ever seen. They fondly called her Princess. Although that name was very fitting because she demanded to be treated with the utmost respect and admiration, just as any princess would. But when I bought her in 2002, I decided that name was probably not going to work, so I gave her the nickname of Lucy. Lucy was the most intelligent animal I've ever known. You could show her something once, and she just got it. We grew to know each other so well, she could feel if something was bothering me. I remember as I was going through college and working to get accepted into med school and taking the MCATs. I stressed myself to the point of giving myself ulcers. And I'd come home on the weekends just to see her. And of course to beg my mom to do my laundry too. I would go into her stall and just sit there next to her, and she would just put her head in my lap and it would all go away. She was my best friend. I'd turn her out in her paddock, and my mom has video of her following me around like a dog. She'd get so excited, I'd take off jogging, and she'd leap through the air and lope right next to me, licking her lips. Lucy was strong. She demanded your respect, and you had to earn hers. You never forced her to do anything, you asked. She grew to despise the drug testers or any vet, really, because back in the day, every time she won a Congress or World Championship, they'd prick her to test her blood, etc. I remember her one year at the Congress, she won the Congress 3 times in one day, and they tested her each time. So I got to where I'd make Leah Leonard or one of my parents take her because it would break my heart because I know how much she hated it after she gave me her all in the show pen. One year at the World Show, we had just won the pleasure, and Andy Anderson, who I adored because he was always so gentle with the horses, walked into the testing stall to pull blood, and I said, "Hold on, Andy, let me get a hold of her because she might run you over." He said, "Oh, I've tested her 1,000,000 times, I got it." So I stepped aside. Seconds later, Lucy ran right into him, almost knocked the stall door off the hinges, busted out, and took off down the aisle bridleless with a world champion neck ribbon waving in the wind. That was her. She wasn't afraid to give you her opinion, and you better listen when she did. You couldn't haul her in a trailer without a ramp, or she'd look at you like, is this some kind of joke? Like, you don't haul the queen without a ramp? I'll never forget the humbling moments of her adoring fans coming to see her in person at the shows. I'd be cleaning her stall, and they'd walk up and burst into tears just being in her presence and being able to touch her. I remember standing there not knowing what to say, but wondering how I ever got so lucky that God chose me to be her person. I could go on all night, but the last story I'll share is my very last Congress with Lucy. It was in 2009. It was the last day of the show. I had the finals of the 2-year-old open with VS Code Red at 8 a.m. that morning, and the amateur Western Pleasure came in the very next class, and I was in the first split with her. With it being the last day, she should have been exhausted, but I knew her and her love of being able to play on the lunge line. So I pulled her out of her stall at about 4 a.m. It was still dark outside and it was freezing, so all her clothes were on. I walked out to the overhang of the Coliseum, and there were people riding everywhere. As I started to let the lunge line out, she reared up straight in the air on her hind legs like a lipizoner and took off running so fast that her legs were a blur. Her body was literally leaning at an angle because she was circling around me so fast, throwing dirt all over everyone. All of a sudden, she falls down and slides across the dirt like a baseball player sliding into home. Then she popped up and looked at me like, wow, kind of took that a little far, didn't I? I remember, actually, Brad Kearns, I don't know if he's still here tonight, but he was out there that morning. And I remember him looking over at me and said, "Is that Lucy?" I said, "Yeah, in all her glory." A couple hours later, I walked out of the Celeste Congress Champion 2-year-old Open with her son, VS Code Red. Lee was standing right there as you go into the warm-up of the Celeste with Lucy. She had her show bridle on and, nothing on her back. Just in time to just swap the saddles, and I literally jumped on Lucy, no warm-up, and jogged right into the Celeste. That was our last class together. She won it unanimously in true Lucy fashion. To the world, you are the famous vital signs are good. But to me, you're my friend that I simply knew and loved as Lucy. Thank you.
Join me in congratulating Vital Signs Are Good as the newest inductee into the NSPA Hall of Fame.